Hello, you're tuned in to AWANI Review with me, Cynthia Ng. Today we are taking a closer look at the topic of women representation at the board level. Now, Malaysia has made some significant strides in this regard. The percentage of women on the boards of top 100 listed companies in Malaysia has in fact nearly doubled over the past decade. So this is a great achievement, but while we raise our glasses to celebrate this, there is still a gap. There are still challenges in our journey to make boardrooms truly equitable. So joining me today to talk more about this, I have with me Kasturi Nathan, the Enterprise Risk Leader at Deloitte Southeast Asia, and as well as Dr. Azura Shamuddin, Group Head of Data Privacy and Compliance at Maxis. Dr. Azura is also a recent graduate of Deloitte's Board Ready Women program. So congratulations on that, first of all, and thank you so much to both of you for being on the show.
Most welcome.
Now, let's kick things off to talk about the progress that we have seen so far. The latest figure that we have received from Budget 2025, 32.2% average of board positions are held by women of top 100 listed companies in Malaysia. So this is great. In fact, more than double compared to, say, 2016. So let's talk about this first, the good stuff. What's driving this progress? Maybe Kasturi can start with.
Okay. Firstly, thank you for having me in your panel today. Well, the achievement is remarkable. I must say it is very positive. It's been growing very positively. And more importantly, I think what culminated to this effort or these achievements is a combination of various stakeholders. In point to note will be the effort taken by the policymakers, regulators, some of the academicians, the institutions which are in support, and most importantly, the market participants themselves. So they've been, collectively, these cohorts of stakeholders have, put together a lot of effort in ensuring the achievement of the quota that has been, earmarked for Malaysia to clearly pursue. And when I spoke about regulatory, I just want to put in record two in particular. One is the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance. So that came out in 2021, and in practice 5.9 of the code, it clearly requires all boards to at least have a 30% representation on the board. And that was closely followed by the listing requirements in 2022, right, that requires the top 100 PLCs, public listed companies, to at least have one women representation on the board. So clearly these are very positive strides taken by the policymakers and regulators put together.
Right. But we do need to keep note that there are still 39 of the top 100 listed companies who have yet to meet the 30% participation target.
That is correct.
And also, let's not forget smaller companies where representations remain lower, of course, compared to the top 100 listed. But with that in mind, I'd like to get to Dr. Azura, having been in the corporate sector for a while. How has the conversation shifted in terms of having more diversity, in terms of women representation in corporate Malaysia, and the recognition that there needs to be more different types of faces, different type of skill sets, and gender in the workplace?
Okay, in terms of my own personal journey, the diversity, equality, and inclusivity has always been part of the DNA of the companies that I've joined, both local as well as multinational companies. Yeah, so that's integral in terms of the recruitment, the promotion, and also the staff well-being. So we don't see in the corporate settings, most of us don't see gender diversity as something of a challenge. In fact, we actually consider it's gender blind. So I've had, very fortunate enough to have bosses who always supported the team in terms of their experience, their skills, the value that they bring to the table. It has never been a gender issue. In fact, for mothers in the corporate sector, there's also benefits that actually support them to be able to return to work. So, for example, during my time, the maternity leave was only 2 months. But younger generations now are really fortunate because most of the companies have adopted 4 months and some even 8 months, full pay, at half pay, and so on and so forth. So this is basically an encouragement to the women workforce to continue to be in the workforce even after they have started a family of their own. I think this is basically very important, especially for Gen Y and Alpha, who don't see gender as an issue. They are gender blind, even more so than my generation. They would want to join companies that are that have the shared values as they do in terms of diversity, equality, and inclusivity. And for women representation, when the nation came out from COVID-19 back in 2023, we see equal representation of male and female in the workforce. Right, I think we also see, I grew up with the likes of Tun Rafida Aziz as the iconic and successful women in politics. And then our own First Lady, Datuk Sri Wan Azizah, also have break the glass ceilings. And in terms of my own legal and compliance space, we have the Tan Sri Tengku Maimun as the first Chief Justice female Chief Justice to be put in that position. So for the rest of us, we look at all these female leaders as people who have broken the glass ceiling. So for the rest, it's a question of whether we as women in the workforce, what do we want out of our career aspirations? Do we want to be in a leadership position? So when we are in the leadership position, do we want to continue being part and parcel of a contributing member of the board? So this is a question that all women, and I guess put it that way, men as well, whether it's something that is aligned with their aspiration, with their personal choice. And the other things that the government has done in terms of structural reform, as Kasturi has mentioned, has helped. I'm fortunate enough to be a member of the recent cohort that the Deloitte Board Ready Women Program. And I think moving forward, I think we know that Deloitte will continue to do this in the coming years to ensure that there will always be a consistent board-ready women that can take on the help in terms of succession planning.
Right. It's great to hear that you had a fantastic experience in your journey in Malaysia and also abroad, and when it comes to advancing in your professional development in your career, right? But I think for a lot of women as well, maybe in companies which have yet to recognize the importance of gender diversity in leadership roles or in boardrooms, there is still a gap in sense like you have women joining workforce in large numbers, but you have a lot of women as well becoming managers, but to move up from that level, to go to the next level, like Dr. Azura, to fulfill your full potential, right? So where do you see are the existing challenges still that needs to be addressed?
That's a very great question, in fact. So there are I would say different multi angles to it, right? So again, we spoke of policy changes, we spoke of incentives. Even in the recent budget, the Prime Minister announced incentives for return to work for mom programs, which employers can apply for if they so are able to draw these women back to the corporates, and they have an incentive over that. So these are again the policy changes, the regulatory push around it. What also remains very important is the training, upskilling, mentoring programs, which I think must be readily available for these women to take that leadership position. So the question is, how well are these women supported by other female directors whom are already on the board? That's one aspect. Yeah. The other is how are senior management or ready to women whom are ready to take on leadership position, how are they exposed to training programs, upskilling programs that allows them to appreciate the challenges, to help overcome some of these challenges, and so the tools have got to be provided, and hence there must be a sort of a healthy transition to allow them to transition into these leadership roles. I personally like to use the concept of a family. as a family, when a lady and a man, they start a family, family is always seen as a nucleus to civilization. So if you bring the concept of a family and that to an organization, it takes both genders, not just the ladies, it does require the men just as well to work alongside the structures within the organization, and that actually takes me to my point of culture. So the culture within the organization must equally support, right, this transition. The fact that, again, as genders, both men and women, we support one another towards the growth of the organization and for the purpose it is meant to drive. If that answers your question.
Well, yes. I think also I do want to. While a lot of companies have made positive strides in terms of gender diversity, I think what we're talking about, right, also to how can the rest of them follow suit, right? I do want to talk about experiences, both your experiences, because if we ask women who are trying to move up the leadership or corporate ladder, some of the challenges remain, such as unconscious bias, for instance, or even some of the things that have been quoted that I have read, networking barriers, mom guilt, balancing family and career. These are still real challenges for women. And do you think these issues are getting better, or are they still holding women back from reaching their full potential? Dr. Azura.
I think I would like to answer that question from the lens of women themselves. So we know that now we have 50% of women in the workforce, right? And as you say, that women participation reduces as you go up the corporate ladder. So it is a question that women themselves need to answer. Where do I want to be? What is my career aspiration? Do I want to go up the corporate ladder? And if you want to go up the corporate ladder, what is it that you have to do? What are the skills that you need to acquire? Not just only the technical part, but also the skill sets, the communication, the ability to able to see, a broad perspective of things, not only in the space of where you are the subject matter expert, but also generally in all other areas. And with that, after achieving probably a C-suite, then the question again boils down to the women themselves. Do they want to take up that board position, right? So at the end of the day, I think it is a personal choice of the women. Most of us feel that they have enough on their plate because of family obligations, or they have lack of support on a personal level, so which stops them from going and pursuing that aspiration if they have one to start with, right? But for me, and I think a lot of you and also the rest of the other 28 participants for cohort 2024, we have made that decision that we are already here in our career, and we definitely want more because we feel that we can contribute by becoming a board member in terms of giving that diversity perspective, rather than you have an all-boys club, for example, or sitting on the board, right? And we do also have our fathers, our grandfathers, who are really supportive of women, because they also want to see their women, the women members of in their family members actually succeed, not only the men. And you see more and more of this. And even coming back to Deloitte's program, it's not only about women, you see men directors participating, sharing their journey, giving constructive feedback in terms of how women see themselves, and also how we can actually do it better by tempering a little bit of the emotion out, perhaps, for the more emotional women, to look at it from a professional perspective. You have many examples like Tan Sri Wahid, who is so supportive. He said half of his management team are women, and he also wants to see these women be a board member one day.
Right. Kasturi, do you agree? Is it down to personal choice, or do you think there are still structural barriers in place that's hindering women from progressing?
Yeah. In fact, unconscious bias is a real thing. It's a real thing, and I think it's always going to be. It will always remain in one way or another, in some form or another. And typically the type of biases that we see is authority biasness. Sometimes depending on who speaks louder, who has a higher rank and authority, then you tend to be more biased towards the individual's response. There is also groupthink around what majority thinks, right? So again, there is that level of biasness, etc. But I think what is more important is the governance process around, for example, around the functionality of the nomination committee in the recruitment of these women directors. So the nomination committee has a huge responsibility, right, in undertaking the responsibility to recruit again directors to the board or to the board committees. And that process, from where I see, or what I see when I evaluate boards, is very critical. Okay. So that there must be a good, healthy level of transparency in the nomination committee's recruitment process. So what I mean by that is, number one, the manner in which the interview is conducted, right, over the candidates. There must be a predefined set of questions where they are able to obviously be very complete, thorough, neutral, relevant, regardless of gender, right? Questions to candidates. Number two, there should be anonymity in the candidate that's being discussed. Apart from skill set, expertise, experience, and professionalism, you may want to anonymize the name, the gender at the initial stages of the discussion, so that again removes that level of biasness. And the third component is, where do you seek these directors from? What are the search channels? So again, we should have the nomination committee of every organization should have a varied search channel approach. So instead of going back to golf course buddies or spa school friends, and which then draws you back to the similar stereotyping of gender recruitment process, you otherwise allow yourself to be more exposed to more varied network channels, search channels. So these processes will help elevate, the sort of or minimize the unconscious biasness that will otherwise, sometimes is quite apparent across boards, right, as you have mentioned.
Yeah, and I think that also addresses some of the other diversity issues, like having diverse people from different backgrounds, socioeconomic background, even race or age even. So
that's right. Demographic diversity alongside cognitive.
Just staying on that for a bit, Kasturi, because you talk about evaluation, I do wonder, as someone that's looking at corporate governance closely, like when you talk about effectiveness, how do you assess a board's success in terms of gender diversity? Is it hitting that 30% mark, or is there more to it? How does it translate into the organization so that it is sustainable? It's not just like, okay, we've ticked the box, moving on.
Correct. Okay. Great. We do it from two facets. One is the quantitative aspect, one is the qualitative aspect. So from a quantitative aspect, yes, it is the parameters in which questions are relating to targets, for example. So has the board established a target? How well has the target been achieved? How well has the target been defined at the senior management cohort, and how is that being measured to the board? Right, so targets are achieved, achievement of targets, achievement of discussions around the nomination committees, recruitment criteria process, etc. So these are quantitative aspects of it. The qualitative aspects of it will be assessed through the interview process in which I conduct the evaluations through. So when I interview directors, especially directors whom are tasked with the governance or with the task or governance of managing diversity, boardroom diversity, then the questions around the nominating commission chairman, for example, or the board chairman or the committee chairman will be around concepts of how well do they consider boardroom discussions to be diverse? How do they ensure that we have a complete a complete and comprehensive discussion around all aspects of the strategy paper, for example, to avoid, again, groupthink. How do you bring in the different skill sets, expertise, area of experience across boardroom discussions? So when when we evaluate these boards over these questions, then we have a lot of these comments and interview response which correlates to how one can then either enhance or further reinforce their efforts around gender diversity.
All right. So having that accountability as
having,
well.
yes, the conscious accountability to drive this pursuit even further.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, turning back to Dr. Azura, I'm quite intrigued with your professional journey, and I do wonder, now at where you are today, of course, it hasn't. I'm sure there's a lot of challenges, right? But where do you think in corporate setting, where measures that had really helped you to move up to where you are today, to fulfill your potential? As you said, this is down to personal choice, but there definitely has programs or trainings or even like just maybe mentorship like that that's really put you to where you are today.
Okay, in all the companies that I've worked for, the one thing that have been put across is that you are your own person, your unique proposition is you, and you need to take charge of your own career. No one's going to do it for you, right? So if you believe that you want to go up the corporate ladder, so what do you need to do to gain that skills, to gain new or embarking on new continuous professional education? And in this, I've been fortunate to have worked for companies that have a lot of budget in that sense in terms of learning and development, right? And having that budget doesn't mean that you're going to get it, because at the end of the day, you have to source for what's relevant to the company that you work for, and how you're going to deliver that at the end of the day in terms of the strategy and direction of the company. I like what Kasturi mentioned about board selection, having a diverse selection panel. From what I see, a lot of the advertisement now is focusing on having a women director, right? I hope one day that woman director will not come into the equation. It will be about parity of gender, because we have equal composition of workforce, women and men, right? And I would want that selection panel to consider that both men and women can bring the same value or different values, but different perspective to the table. And one of that is, like Kasturi mentioned, is about setting a standardized criteria. What are the board members that you are looking for? What are the skills? What are the experience that you want to see? And when you see the board profile, all the personal identifiers like gender, name should be eliminated during the first shortlisting, right? So you have a pool of candidates that apply, but you don't know who they are. So the selection panel should take up or should shortlist out of these 10 who are the candidates that they feel closer to the agenda of the companies, and also in terms of blind recruitment. This I would like to say blind recruitment, right? So you don't see the gender traits anymore. So it's everyone, both male and female, have the same experience, qualifications. So after that, moving to the second level of shortlisting, then you meet the person and you evaluate them on other criteria. But the first level, it should not be just I want to hire 30% of women as part of the board. So my view is that we should move with gender parity, 50-50, with equal contribution. You are selected based on your own merits.
I really like that, because I think sometimes when we talk about the values that women bring to leadership, that tends to reinforce gender stereotypes as well. Okay, so the final few minutes that we have, I do want to talk about. Okay, so we have achieved a target, not all companies, but we have come a long way. So what is next, and how do you get everyone else on board? How do you have this mentality or this governance structure across corporate Malaysia in a wider context, and how do you think you can help them in terms of like trying to move the needle a little bit more?
Sure. I believe it should start most importantly with the board. The board must clearly formalize a policy around diversity, right? So this is a policy, so this goes beyond gender, right? So gender, age, ethnicity, mixed skill set, experience. So that being a policy that drives diversity. And alongside that policy, there must be implementation measures, clearly reinforcing how it has to be communicated again clearly throughout the organization in order to then address culture. So that has to transcend all the way from policy at the boardroom to middle management and all the way to throughout the organization, to then be measured across the culture vis-a-vis KPIs. So KPIs again must be clearly be put in place. How exactly do you measure diversity? Could it be number of diverse candidate recruitment that one may have engaged, departments may have engaged, and that being KPI. Number two could be the number of incidences that one may have received over discrimination. So that could be a second KPI. So the KPIs have got to be clearly developed and implemented, and that measured throughout to manage in order to look into the success of these policy being implemented across the organization. I think that is key.
Okay.
I don't think the work stops there. Even when the whole 100 top public listed companies achieve the 30% target, we still have 281 more public listed companies, right?
That are just
small
the
cap and the medium.
Correct.
So and we have even bigger than that. We have more companies that should actually consider diversity, equality and inclusivity as part and parcel of their commitment. Why do I say that? Because these companies that are better at implementing, internalizing this DEI, in certain, we have research saying that they are more successful because they have greater or wider reach in terms of customers. Because customers, if you look at women, they want to buy products and services from companies that consider women are equally important as men, right? And you also have companies or workforce that are always looking for to work for companies that share that same value, and this basically enhance the reputation of the company. What are you going to lose at the end of the day, right? So it's a greater reach.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Kasturi and Dr. Azura, for sharing fantastic insights. I think we could go on for another hour to talk about this, but we'll keep it for our next discussion.
Sure.
Thank you once again.
Thank you,
Dr.
Cynthia.
Azura.
Thank you.